Christmas is right around the corner, isn't it? I know it's a busy time of the year with all the parties and events happening at church and work and school and all these other programs going on. Hopefully you're not too busy to keep that relationship going with Jesus. Okay, what do we got coming up this week? Well, we're in the unit that's entitled Answers to Tough Questions, Defending What You Believe. This is lesson number 4. It's called Is Jesus God? Out of Luke chapter 1, verses 26 through 35. The point of the lesson is everything about Jesus' birth points to his divinity. So I'm recording this today out of our church nursery, which is quite appropriate, I think, since we're talking about the birth of baby Jesus. Well, one of the basic beliefs we have concerning Jesus is that he was both 100% God and 100% man. And hopefully you know that. I hope you do. But you know, maybe not everybody else does. I know when I was a Sunday school director 25 or 30 years ago as a layperson in a church, one of my children's Sunday school teachers, I think she taught like first, second grade, she was reading the Sunday school lesson. It was this time of year, and she came up to me and she said, Jim, the lesson book here says that Jesus was both human and God. Is that right? And I had to explain to her how it was. So maybe not even people in some leadership positions actually know that. All right, so that's what we're looking at this week. And our text is out of Luke chapter 1. Probably a familiar account to most of your Sunday school attenders, but there again, don't assume. You never assume. All right. I have just a few comments about this, the lesson text this week, and maybe give you some additional supplemental info concerning Jesus being God. All right. Well, looking in Luke chapter 1, verse 26, we see that this is the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy. Who's Elizabeth? Well, she's that cousin of Mary's, and she is past childbearing years herself. So God is accomplishing two seemingly impossible tasks in this same family. One is way too old to have a child. The other one is a virgin. Now let's talk about the word virgin and virgin birth here for a minute. The Old Testament prophecy in Isaiah 7:14 that says a virgin will conceive and bear a son and you will call his name Emmanuel. Well, that word virgin in the Old Testament, there's an argument that that word could be it could specifically mean a woman who has never had intercourse, or generally it could just talk about a young woman. And so some argue that that's just a young woman, not necessarily a virgin as we might think of it. And you know, that's similar to how we might use the word maiden today, okay? That a young maiden may be just a young female, or it may be, as we think about a maiden, as somebody who'd never had relations with a man. Well, if we look down in verse 34 of our text, we can see how Mary answered Gabriel's announcement. She says, how can this be since I am a virgin? Okay. Also, now we can say that might be that she's a young woman. How can that be? Well, let's look over in Matthew chapter 1, verses 24 and 25. It says that Joseph took Mary home to be his wife after the angel told Joseph that it was okay to take Mary as his wife. But then what does verse 25 say? But he had no union with her until after the baby was born. So some people may have a problem with the virgin birth, but here's the way I look at it. If God can create the universe out of nothing, if he can create Adam out of the dust of the ground, then I have no problem believing that Jesus was born of a virgin. All right. Now, the angel Gabriel's announcement indicates that this baby would be the promised Messiah. We see in verse 32, it says, he will be great. He will be called Son of the Most High. The Lord God will give him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over Jacob's descendants forever. His kingdom will never end. Okay, that's great. That's a pronouncement about the Messiah, but is he really God? Is the Messiah God? Well, let's look back in Isaiah chapter 9, verses 6 and 7. What does it say about the promised one? For unto us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the greatness of his government and peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forever. Now, Gabriel doesn't come out and say, your baby's going to be God himself, but the reference back to Isaiah's prophecy that this Messiah will be called Everlasting Father and Mighty God, well, Jesus is both. He is both Messiah and God. All right, I want to talk a little bit about some supplemental information. This is all out of the Bible about Jesus being God. Now, does Jesus actually come out and say, hey guys, I'm God? He doesn't do that. And so some people will use that argument. Well, Jesus never claimed to be God. Well, like I said, there's some truth to that. However, there are some other Bible texts that point to Jesus not just being human, but being God as well. John 8:58, Jesus is talking to the Jews about their ancestor Abraham, and he said, before Abraham was, I am. Referring to what Yahweh told Moses, go tell them that I am sent you. Well, we look at the next verse in chapter 8, verse 59 of John. It says the Jews, they picked up stones to stone him. Well, there were only certain sins, only certain crimes punishable by stoning. There were sexual sins, sorcery, murder, kidnapping, blasphemy, and none of those former things was happening here in this story. But to the Jews who were listening to Jesus talking, they knew he was talking about the I am. He was referring to himself, claiming to be God. Now, in John chapter 20, verse 29, after the resurrection, Jesus appears to Thomas. He says, hey, doubting Thomas, put your hand in my side, put your fingers in my hands here. I am Jesus. And how does Thomas reply? He replies, my Lord and my God. Now, this is not an OMG statement, an exclamation that we hear on so many of those home makeover shows. This was Thomas exclaiming that Jesus was God. So he identified that as well. And then in John chapter 10, verses 30 through 33, Jesus says these words, I and the Father are one. Again, the Jewish opponents picked up stones to stone him, but Jesus said to them, I've shown you many good works from the Father. For which of these works do you stone me? And they said, we're not stoning you for any good work, they replied, but for blasphemy, because you, a mere man, claim to be God. There you have it. Old Testament prophecy, the angel's announcement, and the recognition from both his disciples and his opponents that he claimed to be God. So let's be thankful, especially this season, that God loved us enough to become human to save us. All right, next week we're looking at, aren't all religions the same? And I'll give you perhaps maybe a surprising answer to the question, do all roads lead to God? All right, pray for your class, guys. Thank you so much for watching.